So this is a humidor. And I know, it's really big. The client owns a lot of cigars. And when he gave it to me, it was pretty much like this, a basic box cabinet with sliding glass doors. And what he commissioned me to do is replace those sliding glass doors with regular wood frame cabinet doors with inset glass, put a crown molding across the top and a detail molding around the bottom. And the idea was to basically wrap the whole thing in nicer cabinet work while keeping the basic structure of the humidor the way it is. Now this thing is made out of Spanish cedar, which I can't really source here in northern Ohio, and even if I could, it would be way too expensive. So after some back and forth, the client and I agreed that I would make my parts out of white ash. It's readily available, pretty easy to work with, cost-effective, good strong wood. So it's going to be good for this project, except for one problem. White ash and Spanish cedar do not look a damn thing alike. The problem is the color matching. And in order to get that right, the first thing I have to do is really analyze what I'm starting with. If you look closely, you can see that this Spanish cedar has a very deep grain. It's a porous grained wood. And that's one of the reasons that I went with ash. The deep grain of ash looks pretty similar. Now, the deep grain of this wood, the Spanish cedar, is filled in black, and it's very solid looking. And then the field of the wood has this reddish-brown sort of mahogany stain. Now this was commercially ordered, it came from China. We don't have any information on exactly what it was stained with. So no matter what I'm doing, I'm going to have to mix a custom color to match this as well as I can. So what I'm going to need to do is build this color up in layers, getting the black first and then blending the browns and the reds to bring out the right tone that I need. To get that black in the grain, I'm going to use ebony stain. And I'd like to pause here for a second and just say that I think ebony stain is the worst, most poorly named product in the history of finishing. It does not make wood ebony, it doesn't even make wood black. It makes wood this washed out gray color, and frankly, Minwax should be embarrassed to sell this stuff. If you actually want to make wood black, I highly recommend Fiebing's leather dye. It sounds weird, but it's extremely powerful stuff and it will really get your wood a dark, rich black. I've linked to it in the description. A tiny bottle will last you a long time. But getting back to the actual project, even though ebony stain kind of sucks, it's actually perfect for this application because stain has a really good property of settling into the grain of woods like ash. It's got that thick, grainy pigment in it. And so when I paint on the ebony stain and wipe it off again, I'm not going to get a dark, rich color, but I am going to get black, solid grain. And that's what I need. Once the ebony stain is on and I've wiped off the excess, I let it dry overnight. And then the next day, I'm going to sand the whole piece really thoroughly. I'm actually sanding off most of the ebony stain because I need most of the wood to be bare to accept the other colors that I'm going to apply later. I only want that black pigment to be in the grain of the wood itself. Now that I've got the ebony stain applied and sanded back, I'm going to move the whole project to the kitchen because there's a lot less dust here to get into my finish. Now, I've already got the black grain sorted out, so the next job is to bring out those red and brown highlights that are in the original Spanish cedar. And the stain that I chose for this is red mahogany, because it's basically a mixture of red and brown. It's a no-brainer. I'm putting it on just like you would any other project. Brush it on, let it soak in for 20 minutes or a half hour, wipe off the excess, and then I'm going to let it dry overnight. When a lot of these brownish stains are wet, they give you a false read on the color. This actually looks a lot redder than it is when it's wet, and it dries to a much duller color. So when I finished the red mahogany stain, it really looked like I might be done because the color match between the two pieces was really good. But now the red mahogany has dried overnight, and you can see when I hold this test piece up to the humidor, it's too brown. It doesn't have the nice red highlights that the Spanish cedar has. Now part of that is that I don't have the clear coat on yet. I'm going to use polyurethane and that's going to give it a little bit of an amber hue and that's going to affect the color a little bit. But there's too much brown and not enough red in this base color that I have now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overstain this again using Sedona red stain. It's another Minwax product and it has a very bright red color to it. Mixed with the other things, it should give me the color that I need. Now, I am on to stain number 3, which means there's already a lot of pigment in this wood, and I could run into problems getting the wood to accept another stain on top of what's already there. Luckily, there's a really easy solution for this. I'm just going to take some mineral spirits on a paper towel and give everything I've already stained a brisk rub down. It's not going to affect the color that's on it, because the stain that's already soaked into the wood can't be pulled out by mineral spirits. But there's going to be a lot of pigment sitting on top of the wood, and if I get that off with the solvent, then there's going to be space in the wood to accept another color. As the Sedona red stain goes on, it's obviously very red, but there's no reason to get excited about that. That red color is going to go down a lot when I wipe off the excess stain, and it's also going to reduce a lot as the stain dries and becomes more dull in color. So hopefully this is going to give me the rich red highlights I need without messing too much with the base color that I've worked so hard to make. Now that I've got the color blended the way I want, all I have to do is put on the polyurethane, assemble the cabinet, and then to finish up, I've moved the piece outside so you can see it in the brightest possible light. And I think right here you can see how successful it actually was. Now, a trained woodworker would look at this and know that they were two different species. But for the client and the people who come to visit him in his house, these two species really look exactly the same. You can see it especially as you come around the corner and you look at the end grain of the ash and the face grain of the Spanish cedar. They both have that dark black grain, a rich reddish brown field, and a nice light clear coat over the top. Nothing too glossy or heavy. So it looks like a piece of fine furniture, but it's understated. And I did all of this stuff with off-the-shelf, big box store finishes. And that kept the cost down for the client and helped the profit be a little bit higher for me. So sometimes this thing happens that's a little bit weird to me. I'll be watching a video or listening to a podcast from a creator that I really like, and they'll be talking about a bad experience they have with a tool company or with a big retailer, but they won't mention who it is they had the bad experience with, because they're afraid that company will never sponsor them if they say anything bad about them. And I totally understand the sponsorship model. A lot of my favorite creators, a lot of my heroes, finance their channels mostly through sponsorship, and I get that. Everybody's got to run their own business. But for me, when I'm running a channel where I'm trying to show you the cheapest, easiest, and best ways to get into woodworking, metalworking, and plastic fabrication, I just don't see how you're going to trust me if I'm also taking money from tool companies that want you to spend a lot of money on their stuff. I think that's just going to hurt my credibility with my audience. And for a little channel like mine, credibility is the main resource that I have. I think the best way for me to preserve my credibility and be an ethical teacher is for this channel to be funded by the viewers. And that's why I'm trying to have the channel funded as much as possible by Patreon. When you throw in a couple dollars on Patreon, you're directly supporting this content, and you're allowing me the freedom to not take sponsorships. Now, it's not like sponsorship opportunities are coming out of the woodwork or anything, but I do get offered free stuff sometimes, and I always say no. And I want to keep saying no. And if you go to patreon.com/RexKruger and throw in just a couple of bucks, I can keep making these videos and not have to look for sponsorships, not have to worry if I piss off some big company, and keep giving you honest and ethical feedback about how you can do things and how you can be a better craftsperson. And while I'm talking about this, let me thank my newest patrons, Jeff Zanin and Colby Patrick. And I really appreciate their support because it's people like them that keeps this channel going. I also really appreciate my viewers. So even if you don't feel like you can contribute, thanks for watching.